So I hope we are all ready to start. Welcome to the EuroRAP Lunchtime Seminar #1, Crash Risk Mapping in the UK and Croatia. My name is Olivera Rosi and I will be your host today. This is the first of EuroRAP's Lunchtime Seminar series, which will provide information about the EuroRAP protocols through the RAP Basics online seminars, insight into iRAP research and innovation through our hot topic seminars, and inspiration for EuroRAP program through our national scheme spotlight seminars. Along with a national scheme forum, these 3 seminars types will be presented in rotation, giving us food for thought every month. I wish your time in seminar will be well spent and we'll have the opportunity to discuss after the presentation and answer all your questions sent in the questions and answers text box during the event. So please note, you won't be able to unmute yourself, but you will be, or your questions are very much welcome. You won't only be able, but we are looking forward for your questions in question and answer text box during the event. Couple of housekeeping notes. Probably all of you are already very familiar with Zoom. You can use text as said questions and answer text box for your questions. This webinar will last for approximately 60 minutes. It can be either shorter or a bit longer in case we have a lot of questions to answer. And I really wish you a nice time during our seminar. Today, we have with us 2 presenters, Brian Lawton. He is the Road Safety Foundation's Research and Program Manager. The Road Safety Foundation is the license holder for UK and Ireland for EuroRAP and has been undertaking crash risk mapping for 20 years. Since joining RSF, Brian has been responsible for some improvements to the crash risk mapping approach and bring his wealth of road safety policy experience alongside his mathematical skills to the table. Hello, Brian. Hi, how are you?
Hi, Ollie. I'm good, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for today's EuroRAP Lunchtime Seminar. And our second speaker is Marko Sevrovic. Marko is the head of the Department of Transport Planning at the University of Zagreb. He is chartered transport engineer and licensed road safety auditor in Croatia. University of Zagreb is a EuroRAP Center of Excellence. This is worth noting as well. He's splitting his time between University of Zagreb and ERA, European Institute for Road Assessment, which I represent as well, where he fills in the position of Senior Road Safety Engineer. Marko, thank you for joining. Welcome. How are you?
I'm fine, Olivera. Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you. So I think we shouldn't further delay this introductory note and let's go immediately to your interesting presentations. Brian will explain the benefit of crash risk mapping. He will explain how this is done and will give an overview of the British results to illustrate how it has been used. After his presentation, if there are some questions, we can answer them. Thank you very much, Brian. Over to you.
Can you hear me? I'm not sure whether I've unmuted myself.
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Fantastic. Thank you,
Brian.
Thanks, Ollie. So thank you for the introduction, Ollie, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to talk about as Ollie said, we're mainly talking about crash risk mapping. So I just want to distinguish that in people's minds from what you might often hear us talking about, which is the star rating. So 2 almost very separate things in a way. So crash risk mapping is all about historic crashes that have actually happened on the network, and it's all about measuring crash risk based on what's happened. So on the left-hand side here, you can see a bit of our map from Britain and a bit of a zoomed-in version as well of different roads. And then on the right-hand side here, just to make the distinction, star rating is all about surveys of the road and what the risk factors are on the road, and you can see some of the ones that we score in star rating. So we're focused here on the left-hand side on crash risk mapping. I just put this together the other day for some colleagues who just to help distinguish the 2, but I'll just run down very quickly the crash risk mapping column here rather than the star rating one. So in the UK, we crash risk map every motorway and A road each year. And as Ollie said, RSF, the Road Safety Foundation, are the license holder for the UK. We publish all our results on our website, rsfmaps.agilicis.co.uk. Agilicis are our data partners in the UK, so they provide the data for us and do a lot of the hard work behind the scenes for us. As I say, all of crash risk mapping is based on historic crash numbers, crashes that have actually happened. And we tend to talk about routes. I'll explain what I mean about the difference between routes and links later on, but we tend to focus on routes in the UK. Other people might use different terminology, but as I say, I'll clarify that later on. We tend to focus on individual risk, what we call individual risks for the crash rate. So this is fatal and serious injury crashes per vehicle kilometre, so FSI crashes per vehicle kilometre. So this is risk to individuals using the road per kilometre that they travel. We sometimes talk about collective risk as well, which is what I call crash density. So that's where it's just FSI crashes per kilometre road length. So that's giving an idea of how close together crashes are, basically. And I'll touch briefly on what I call the investment case later on, which is where we talk about BCR, benefit cost ratio, top 10% of routes, for example. But yeah, I just want to emphasize crash risk mapping is what we're talking about today. Don't get confused with star rating, which is something different but related. So just our crash risk maps, you've already seen a small excerpt from one. Basically, we rank routes from low risk in green through yellow, orange, red, up to black, high risk. And you can see some examples of each of those colours, I think, on this map here from Yorkshire in England. As I say, we tend to focus on individual risk. So we're looking at the number of crashes resulting in fatal or serious injury per vehicle kilometre travelled. As I say, we do all motorways and A roads now, and we've got about 4,000, getting on for 4,000 routes. So this is a slightly zoomed out version of some of our map. Why motorways and A roads, you might ask? It's because they form about 13% of road length, but actually they account for 60% of road deaths. So more than half of road deaths are on our motorway and A road network. So the two sort of highest tier levels of road in the UK. One other thing to say here is we always look over 3 years, and that's just to make sure our crash numbers are a little bit more robust. So the latest results we've published are for 2017 to 2019, the 3-year period, 2017, 2018 and 2019. And you can find all of this on our website. If you literally go to roadsafetyfoundation.org, under tools, you'll find a link to our crash risk mapping data portal. So each year we identify significantly improved routes. I won't go through the details of these in turn, but you can see 3 highlighted on this route. One's section of motorway, one's quite an urban road, and one's quite a rural road. If you've heard of Barnard Castle, I think it's somewhere around here at the bottom of this yellow one here. So I don't know whether you can see where I'm pointing, I meant here. The most significant improved route we had last year, with a huge reduction in the number of fatal and serious collisions of more than 2/3, was the A3095 in Bracknell. So this highlighted road in light blue, or cyan, I suppose, that goes through the middle of Bracknell. It's got a split in it because there's another road that goes across the middle, and that's so it's not one complete road. There's a short break in the middle, but you can see actually over time the flow's been increasing very gradually on this road. The black line here is the number of fatal and serious crashes, but we've also got on here the total number of crashes resulting in injury. So you can see from 2014 to 2016 the numbers were going up, and then we had a sudden big reduction in 2017, and it's continued to go down since 2019. And there were various reasons for that. There were speed limit reductions, there were various improvements made to the roadside edge, and lighting and various other improvements. So we always identify the improvements because we want to celebrate success and the fact that the roads got better for good reason. As well as identifying significantly improved routes, we identify what we call persistently higher risk routes. So there are a few criteria in here, but one of them is that basically the road has to be in one of the 2 worst bands in both 3-year periods, in this case 2014 to 16 and 2017 to 2019. So you can see the one at the top of this list was in the red band, so the second worst band in the previous 3 years, and then in the most recent 3 years it's actually deteriorated into the lowest band. We identify crash types for each route, so you can see that 9% of the crashes on this route, for example, involved motorcycles. And you can also see this column is just highlighting whether they're part of the Safer Roads Fund, which I'll touch on later. You can see there's one in the middle that was. The other 4 here weren't. I'll come back to that later on. This is just to give you a bit of an overview of some of the graphs we present, some of the results we present. So again, we've got 2014 to 16 at the top, 2017 to 2019 at the bottom. And you can see between the top and the bottom, we've actually had an increase in the amount of green and the amount of yellow, so the lowest risk routes, and a decrease in the amount of black, so the highest risk routes. So in other words, the network as a whole is improving. And that matches with the fact that the number of crashes has been reduced by around 10% across the network as a whole. So there's been a 10% reduction in crashes, and we've seen a shift towards safer roads, so that tallies. This is just a flag we can split by various ways. So in this case, we're splitting Britain into its 3 country parts, so England, Scotland and Wales, and we can then see the differences between England, Scotland and Wales in terms of the results. And there's good reasons for the differences. It's not about sort of saying, well, this country's doing well and this country's doing badly. There are different challenges in different parts of the United Kingdom. And this is just splitting. We've got England, Scotland and Wales split, but also strategic and local roads split. So you can see the crash rate on strategic roads in each of the 3 countries is much lower than on the local road network. That makes sense. Our busiest roads we spend most on in terms of making as safe as possible. And again, we can split at the network level by, in this case, urban, rural and motorway into different crash types. So you can see, for example, that urban roads, the most common crash type is vulnerable road users. That's pedestrians, cyclists and horse riders. Not that there are many of them. On rural roads, the most common crash type is at junctions, intersections. But it's very different. And on motorways, the most common crash type we have now in the UK is rear end shunts. So where someone drives into the back of someone else. And that's partly because what's happened over time is that we've eliminated a lot of other crashes on motorways. So for example, runoffs, there aren't as many runoffs as there used to be. There aren't that many intersection or vulnerable road user crashes because of the way that they're designed. Head-ons are virtually eliminated. So that it's not that shunts are a particularly high risk, it's that motorways are relatively safe, and actually shunts are kind of the biggest group that are left. We can also see how crash rate changes over time in different parts of the country. So overall, there was a 13% decrease in crash rate. So that's kind of tallying with the 10% decrease in crash numbers, because there was also a traffic flow increase. That's why this number is bigger than 10% here. But you can see that reduction applies in all 3 parts of Britain. And we can split that within England. We often look by region to get more of a granular idea. That was the change in crash rate. This is the actual crash rate having had the change. So you can see how different parts of the country are performing. And again, there'll be reasons why there were differences in performance. It's not about shaming people. It's about learning lessons from where things are going well. That's all crash rates and a very quick canter through. This is just looking at what I call crash density, so the collective risk. So this is per kilometre of road length rather than the label on the side is wrong here, I think, rather than the crash rates that we had that we've been looking at so far. So you can see here that the English roads, the crash density is a lot higher in England, whether on strategic or local roads, than in Scotland and Wales. So yeah, that's just a different way of looking at risk. And I've started to sort of play with this concept of this matrix of individual risk versus collective risk. So the crash rate versus the crash density. And I should thank someone who's on the call, because he's helped to inspire this slide in my thinking. So thank you, Stuart, for your contribution as we've thought about some of these issues. I think sometimes people aren't sure what they mean by risk. And I think this is why I talk about individual risk versus collective risk, because it depends whether you're looking at it from the point of view of the road user or a road authority. So you might have a road that's relatively high risk for someone using it, but if very few people use it, you won't actually have that many crashes on it. So it feels like it's high risk, but it might actually not have that many crashes on it. Or the other extreme is that a road might be really low risk, but have high collective risk. And that's because although per user it's really safe, you've just got so many vehicles using it that actually the number of crashes adds up. So this isn't about prioritization of risk at this point, the prioritization of roads. It's just to get an idea that actually individual risk, the crash rate, as people might refer to it, isn't always the most useful measure. And I'll come back to a little bit more about that in a moment. Just moving on to the Safer Roads Fund, which I mentioned earlier. So this was a scheme set up in 2017. Where our Department for Transport, our government body, basically said we're going to spend money to improve the 50 worst roads, and they totaled around 700 kilometres of network. The roads were selected on the basis of our crash risk mapping, so they took the 50 at the top of our individual risk map, and said they're the ones we're going to fund. So it wasn't a competitive fund. Which in the UK at least things often are. So that changed people's perceptions a little bit. Basically, they just had to show that they were going to do something worthwhile rather than them competing. And if they got the money, someone else didn't. It wasn't like that. All 50 were able to get the funding. And as you can see, it was started in 2017, 2018. And there were various aims of that fund. So this is just looking at the individual risk again in a different way. Basically, we're taking routes that were black routes, the highest risk routes, and we're trying to move them down towards the bottom end, the green and yellow, where things are a lot safer. It was all about targeting these high risk routes. There were various other things involved in what the fund was trying to do. So it's all about building capacity for safe system delivery, being more proactive and encouraging collaboration. I won't run you through this slide. Essentially what we did was star rate the 50 as a way of then working out what improvements to make to the 50. But I won't go into the detail of that because that's going to confuse. The idea is we're focusing on the highest risk individual routes. And out of that came all sorts of treatments. So a lot of bends were improved, speed limits were reduced in some cases, pedestrian fencing, pedestrian footpaths were improved, cycle routes were improved, crossings, any number of things. And overall, the government put in around £100 million between 2018 and 2021. So this slide's slightly out of date now, but they put in around 100 million. And we estimated based on our model that 1,450 lives and serious injuries might be prevented over the next 20 years. Which is a huge number in itself, but also has a financial value, we think, of around £550 million. So actually, even economically, there was a really strong return here per pound spent. We estimate that the country as a whole is going to benefit to the tune of more than £4 per pound spent. And actually, since we did that, we've started to look at we've tried to improve, if you like, the way that investment packages might be selected. So, I mean, the detail of this table isn't particularly important here, but what we've started to do is try and highlight, if you like, the 10% of roads within a given road network that are the most likely to have a good financial return. So this is all about justifying money for investment from ultimately our Treasury, our central government financial department. Identifying the types of roads that would be likely to have good returns to justify investment that would save prevent lots of deaths and serious injuries, but also have a really good financial return. So you can see we've just got the network split by various types here to get an idea of how it varies in different parts of the country. Just very briefly, I'll run you through, if you like, a bit more detail about the way that we go through the process in the UK, and I'm sure there'll be similarities with what Marko talks about later on. So this is a kind of our how-to guide, if you like, that we're starting to develop. So one of the things that we have to do each time is at the beginning, of the process is obtain the license. So as Ollie said earlier, the Road Safety Foundation are the license holders for crash risk mapping in the UK. we then go through identifying our target audience and our objectives and planning our reporting. You've seen some of the graphs that we present, but working out, if you like, what some of the strategic messages are and who we're aiming at is so key. The fields of interest is really worth thinking about. So in our case, we split strategic and local roads. We split English, Scottish, Welsh roads. We often split rural and urban, not always for good reason. But it's all about identifying which fields we need to segregate the data by in order to work out how we segment the network. And what we then do, because we have flow data and crash data at a very local level, we end up with lots of really short links that we can then join together. So we can have a strategic route that's many miles long, that's consisting of lots of individual links. So we work out, if you like, the average crash rate or the average crash density on that route as a whole. But it's based on much smaller links. So we can drill down to the data at the link level if we need to. The reason we want to join lots of links together is simply for statistical robustness. So on a small number of links, if you only have one or two links in a route, then it's really hard to prove anything statistically. You know, your numbers might change in terms of crashes from 1 to 0, and actually you don't know whether that's an improvement or not, because that could have happened by chance. Whereas across the route as a whole, you'll get something that's much more robust. You know, a change from 20 to 30 crashes is obviously a worsening in terms of the risk. So yeah, that's kind of some of the things that you have to think through, just an overview of when you're setting up crash risk mapping in a country. And then some of these things that we have to revisit each time. So obviously we renew our license every now and then. We restructure the network from time to time as travel patterns and crash patterns change, just to keep live, if you like, to the network and making sure that it's relevant to the road authorities that we're working with. And then each year we go through this process, or rather our data provider, Agilicis, do this for us. So they assign crashes to the network. So it's specifically identifying which road each crash is on, identifying its crash type, so we can then classify it as rear-end shunt or head-on or whatever, and obviously the severities as well. Alongside that, they obtain the flows for each route, the amount of traffic using each route. And then they provide that to us. We put it into a template which does all sorts of calculations, including calculating our calibration factors. So we have to calibrate the network, and we now do rural and urban separately. And that seems to have improved, if you like, the reliability of some of our findings. But the template also works out things like which routes are therefore the most significantly improved, or which routes are coming up persistently high risk. And that's what we mean here by routes of interest. And we take real care about consulting with road authorities before we go to publication. So we identify not just the top 10 of the significantly improved routes, but actually the top 20, 25 routes. And we consult on all of them. And the reason for that is that the consultation sometimes highlights that, we've classified a crash wrong. We've assigned a crash to a particular route, and it wasn't on that route. Is on a different route, and our methodology for assigning crashes hasn't quite captured it right. And also part of the reason for consultation is to find out what improvements have been made on a road, or what improvements might be planned on a road. And also because it gives the road authority advanced warning that we're going to publish something that may give them credit, or indeed give them an amount of questioning, if you like, by media around what's gone wrong on the road that is in our persistently high risk route list. So then following that consultation, we basically go through another iteration, updating the data. And then we spend a bit of time planning exactly how we're going to present which maps, because there are all sorts that we could produce. We could include like crash risk map, yes, beside the crash rate map, which is what we tend to do, but also the crash density map. We've also played with economic maps that show the values of prevention on different routes. So that's slightly different again. And then more recently, as I say, the investment side of things, we've produced an investment map which highlights the routes where we think we're most likely to be able to get a financial benefit from investment. So that takes real planning. And
Brian,
that then also,
sorry.
Yeah, this
Sorry,
is
Brian,
my
just
last
double-
slide, so we're all good, Ollie.
Okay, great.
Perfect timing. Thank you. So yeah, just planning is so key. I can't emphasize it enough. I think that's my biggest learning experience of improve our planning, and that really applies both to the reporting and design of the report to make it a really good, high quality product. To the launch event as well, making sure that we've got interesting presentations, that we're really driving home some of the key messages, some of which we've seen earlier on. We often get a fair bit of media coverage, so we might have interviews about particular roads. And even though, as Ollie said, we've been doing this 20 years, there's still lots more for us to learn. So we always do a lessons learned at the end of the process, just to feed in and improve our processes further. And I think that is it. That's my email address, but I'm very happy to take any questions now if we have time, Ollie.
Thank you, Brian. Such an interesting and inspiring presentation. I haven't seen any questions at the moment. Maybe people are a little bit shy. Please don't be shy. You can post your questions and we'll be happy to answer them either during the event or after the event. Anyway, if you happen to have any questions after the event, we will, of course, be happy to receive them through email and respond to you. If I may just use this opportunity, because I am chairing this, to know that it's an excellent and amazing work you are doing in the UK. And it seems, I took a couple of notes, but it seems what is important, not shaming people, but learning lesson and working together with the road authorities. I would take this as a message for myself.
Yeah, I think on that, Ollie, I think it's really interesting. I think we've learned over the years that actually what it's all about is supporting road authorities to get funding to improve roads that are high risk. And it's all about providing them with the information they need and the scientific backing, if you like, to justify investment to their bosses or to central government or whoever. It's all about, you know, a positive message of there are things that can be done about these roads to improve them further, or, you know, things have been done and they've worked really well. Look, it can be done. It's really highlighting the positive.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. And if I also may add here a question to you, how difficult is to do crash risk mapping? I mean, what kind of capacities does EuroRAP members need in order to perform themselves?
I'd be really interested in Marko's view on that later on, perhaps. Certainly, what I found, as I say, I now am much more conscious about the amount of planning that's needed in a project. So, for instance, we're starting right now with planning our with the start of our project for our launch next year in the summer next year. So we're starting to plan our network, refine our network, starting to get the data organized, because it takes time and effort, and the consultation's key, I think. The consultation is really useful in its own right, actually, with many local authorities. Sometimes they say, well, we didn't realize this road was high risk, or indeed that this road had improved. We're really pleased that that's come, you know, that's showing through. So yeah, I think time is really important, but experience, it certainly helped me. I think the understanding of crash rate versus crash density is something that we've learned over the years and has really helped us improve, if you like, the way we're talking about things. And the investment case, understanding economics is really, really helpful as well. I come from very much from a mathematical background, so I've added to my colleagues' knowledge in terms of engineering solutions. And hopefully between us, we've got the sort of complementary skills to really help with, as I say, with helping road authorities justify investment.
Thanks, Brian. If this story has inspired anyone and want to start risk mapping in your country, just please bear in mind that RSF is part of the management committee of EuroRAP, and Susie Chairman, executive director there, is available, and together with me, we are happy to help you and support you in your path toward starting risk mapping in your country. Thank you, Brian. And then I think we shall give the floor now to Marko, Marko will present Croatian case study and how risk mapping has been done in a recently finalized Slane project. He will showcase how risk mapping can be combined with star rating to select investment priorities. I think this is very interesting to all of us in the European Union, as this is one of the requirements of the new RISM directive. So attention, everyone. Marko, floor to you.
Yes, thanks, Oli, definitely. I'll start with this one nice picture of a road that I will be showcasing in one of the examples. And as you can imagine, it's of course a one-star road with high risk levels in terms of risk mapping. So it might look nice, but in terms of road safety, is quite dangerous. So I'll basically start here with why we use crash risk mapping in Croatia. I have to say here we are, the first crash risk map was done somewhere in 2011, and it was supported by HAC, the Croatian Automobile Club, who back then realized that there is this methodology developed by EuroRAP and iRAP back then, who could actually help them as a let's say a community to show to the public that some roads are riskier than the others. And the good thing about that is actually that those maps are quite simple to understand. So there is a color coding, 5 different colors ranging from black to green, showing you exactly what is the risk of driving on a particular road. And the reason behind it is that the automobile clubs accepted this because they wanted to communicate to their users on how to actually choose a route from point A to point B with the lowest risk. And in that sense, it is quite important here to say that the color-coded maps, there are different types of maps, as Brian was telling already, but the 2 maps that we are, let's say, most likely to observe are the individual road users and the community as a whole risk which is presented on a particular road. The other thing is also with the historical way of dealing with infrastructure road safety and the black spot management, this in a way is a transition from the traditional waiting for people to get injured and killed on some locations to do something, to a more proactive way of actually trying to identify sections which are more prone to crashes than other sections. So this was kind of a step between the black spot management and what we have now with the new RISM directive, the network-wide road safety assessments. So the basic idea is about identifying the high-risk routes. One other aspect of crash risk mapping is that it actually allows the comparison between relative risk within a country, but it also can be used to compare risk between countries. So depending on how you do the calibrations of the risk bands, you can actually calibrate to identify roads which are above a certain median value of a country, but you can also put it on the same risk banding as other countries, and you can actually compare how the roads are performing in each and every country. And here I would also say one of the things which came to as a very important is that the road safety countermeasures are usually and only effective if applied at locations where actual crashes happen. So that's why we still need crash risk mapping. With all of the proactive methodologies, the crash risk mapping actually enables us to maybe better calibrate the investments in the future. So it's a quite a complex situation. So I usually like to show this graph. So it's the star rating protocols, where you look at the road, you collect the attributes, and you calculate how this road performs in terms of the features of the road, and you combine it with the actual crashes which are happening on that road, and that's actually the driving force behind the safer road investment plans. And it ensures that the money that you are investing is actually returning values to the society. The risk mapping, since we are collecting all accidents, we definitely collect accidents which are linked to all three main pillars of road safety. So an accident is always a combination of a user interaction with vehicle and the road. And so if we collect the number of accidents, we are basically collecting all three different user pillars as I would say road safety pillars as the main causes of traffic accidents. And the thing is, I will show you later why this is important, because we can use risk mapping to actually identify locations where road is the contributing factor, or is the factor that can be, let's say, changed in order to improve road safety on a particular location. So in the first case study example that I wanted to show is some of the results from the project SLAIN. As Oli mentioned, that was a project that was co-financed by the Connecting Europe facility of the European Union. And we had partners from different countries, Croatia, Italy, Greece, Spain, and of course EuroRAP as a lead partner there. So in Croatia, the project was supported by the road authorities, the main road authorities, the Croatian motorways and the Croatian roads. And also we had external partners as the Croatian Automobile Club and Ministry of Interior. So we covered the Trans-European road network. The network was 146 different sections, 1,600 kilometers of roads in total. Some of them were, of course, dual carriageways. So we had 1,250 kilometers of motorways and only 350 kilometers of state roads, which are single carriageways that were covered by the SLAIN project. So in the SLAIN project, we produced two maps. One is the first map is the crash risk per vehicle kilometer travel. And it's basically a map of individual risk. And you can see here on the right-hand side how, of course, some of the roads are color-coded in green, some of them are yellow, and also we have some black sections and red sections. And for those of you who actually know Croatia, you can immediately, even from the map, see that there is a high correlation with the good coloring being the motorways and the bad coloring actually being the single carriageway roads, which are very similar to the one that I showed on the beginning. If we look at the map 2 that takes into account the rates of traffic accidents occurrence, you can see that the situation is a little bit different, but on this map, we are expressing the number of fatal and severe injury crashes per kilometer per year. So we don't take into account the traffic volumes here. But again, there are some roads that are, especially motorways, are shifting from low risk or medium risk categories to a medium high risk or high risk, depending on the actual number of crashes which are occurring on that road. But the conclusion here would be that on the motorways, we do have ADT values that are on average 6,500 vehicles per day higher, but the individual risk rates are more than 4 times higher on single carriageways. The crash density, on the other hand, is about 2.5 times higher on the single carriageway roads than on the dual carriageway roads. And I'm sure that this does not come as a surprise to anyone, but these are the numbers and these are the values which are actually proving that, of course, the dual carriageways are much safer than the single carriageways in terms of the number of crashes which occurred in them. Also, in the SLAIN project, we did a trial. So 2 different time periods were used, 3-year time periods were used. And you can see here from the total network, that was the TEN-T network that was observed, that if we observe the period from 2014 and 2018, we had a slight decrease of, let's say, the roads which are categorized in the low risk band. So in the years that were in the 3 years that were after the initial period, so basically only 2 years stayed in the same period because of the duration of the project. you can see that we had a slight change in that category. The other categories are also shifted to one side, and that's mainly because in 2019 it was it was one of the best years in terms of tourism. There was an increase of traffic volumes of almost 6%. And if you compare it to the 2014, which was in that sense lower than that, it actually changed the bands of the risk maps without actual, let's say, works done on the road. And this is something that also needs to be taken into account, because when you're observing risk mapping, you are also observing the changes in total mobility of a country. So something that was quite relevant. And in my second example, I will be showing one project where we were actually combining the iRAP star ratings and the risk mapping to set priorities. And we had a case study on the D8 road between Stobreča and Omiš, between Split and Omiš actually, where we try to, let's say, identify roads where we want to, or sections of the roads where we want to invest. So the thing here is that if you have two maps, two values, if you have a map that is showing risk based on the historical crashes, and you have a proactive map which you derived from the video surveys, so that's basically the star rating. So to take the conclusions, we prepared a matrix like this, where you can actually get some ideas on what should be done on the road. So for example, if you have a section of the road which is high risk in terms of crash risk, and only 1 star in terms of star rating, then it's highly likely that this is a road which clearly and likely is a factor in terms of road safety. You should target the investment improving road safety, and it is very highly likely that any investment in this road will be very cost effective. So you will observe a reduction of the number of crashes. But on the other hand, if you have a very low crash risk, so not a lot of accidents actually happening on a road, but the star rating is 1 star, then the road design is definitely unsafe, but the crash rate is very low. And that is probably because the road is so dangerous. It looks so dangerous that the people are taking extra care. This, of course, has effect on the mobility, because usually on those roads, people are avoiding driving on those roads, and if they are driving slowly. That has again a negative impact on the total mobility. So investments here should be targeted in a way that you should increase the star rating of the road, but especially take into consideration that by increasing the roadside features, we might increase the operating speed, and you can actually make things worse. So this is something that I would say this is a special case for attention. So in the situations like this, if you want to increase the star rating, you might get a wrong effect. You also have to take into account the operating speed when you are doing that. The third case is if you have a high risk rate, but you have a very safe road, it's a 5-star road, then likely, as I was mentioning before, road is not the factor. Probably there are some other factors like speeding, drinking, fatigue, or vehicle safety factors that are contributing to the very high number of accidents occurring on the road, but road is definitely not a factor. And so you only need to ensure that you maintain the road at a high standard that it actually is. And of course, the last case is if you have a low crash risk and star rating is very high, it's a 5-star road, then road infrastructure is already built to a high standard, and you should actually focus your attentions elsewhere. How do we do that? So we have the risk mapping, we have the star rating, and then we select the critical road sections. This is one map showing the correlation between the risk mapping and star rating. So actually this is from Croatia on the TEN-T network, also coming in from the SLANE project. And you can see that there is a really strong correlation between the risk mapping, the actual crashes happening, and the star rating, the proactive methodology to identifying things which are not designed up to the highest standard with your road network. And when you try to actually identify some sections, which I said on this one example from the town of Split to the town of Omiš, with the Croatian methodology of identifying dangerous sections, we were asked to do the prioritization based on the 300-meter sections. So what we did here, we actually mapped and did risk mapping on 300-meter sections. So every 300-meter sections was assigned with the crashes that happened at the actual locations, because we wanted to get statistically more relevant information. We included all types of crashes, not only fatal crashes. So it was fatal crashes, serious crashes, slight injury, and crashes without injury, only damage to the vehicles. So all crashes were included into these calculations, and they were weighted. Of course, the fatal crashes had a stronger weight than the one without injuries, and divided by the number of vehicles kilometers traveled. And this is how it looks. So basically, you had some 300 meters which were in high risk, and the other coming to medium, low, and low, medium risk, and of course low risk. And after that, a star rating was also done on the same section. And you can see here how parts of the road are actually in 4-star, but only less than 1 kilometer. The majority of the road is actually a 2-star road, but there are also 1-star road sections present. If we look at the actual graph of 100-meter sections, you can now see in red color how the risk bands based on the crashes actually changed on the road from very high to very low. And also in the yellow color, you can see how the star rating, the proactive analysis of the road, also changed from high to from 1-star to 4-star, which was the best score achieved on the current section. So even visually, you can see here that there is a correlation on some segments where there is a clear correlation, as I explained in my metrics, that there is a link between accidents actually happening and deficiency detected in the road infrastructure. And if we do a cumulative graph, so if we put the road sections from the highest correlation, where you have a very high risk coming from the actual accidents happening, to a very high risk coming from the star rating, to be on the right side of the graph, and on the left side you have roads which are low risk and very good in terms of star rating, then you can create a graph like this. And what we normally would do in transport engineering, we would select somewhere here. So where the graph is actually changing from a slowly rising to rapidly rising. And then it means that you can randomly choose your percentiles, whether it is the 85th percentile, whether it is the 70 percentile, 50 percentile. It depends on the investment that is actually available to you. And then you can actually prioritize the sections from the ones that are very likely to have the highest return if you do some investments on the road. And here on this example, we actually showed just a few locations where we could expect to have a very high return rates. I hope it didn't take too much time, and if there are any questions, I'm here to answer it for you.
Thank you very much, Marko. Since there are not questions as yet, I wanted to address to you the same question as to Brian, because he was also interested in learning what you would respond to that, but I will put it a little bit differently in terms of what resources are required in order an institution to be able to do a crash risk mapping. What would you suggest to the countries that would like to do crash risk mapping, to start to initiate crash risk mapping? How to start? Brian mentioned the planning, proactive approach, cooperation with public authorities. Is there something that you would advise countries?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things which is definitely the biggest problem in most of the countries when they decide to do risk mapping is to collect the accurate accident data. That's something which is always a problem. In my experience doing this in several countries here in Southeastern Europe, we always had a problem collecting accurate locations. So sometimes you have databases, accident databases, which you cannot really map to the roads, or this mapping is actually not very precise. And then there is a lot of struggle with that. But if you have accurate crash data, and if you have accurate ADT volumes, it is actually very simple. So it's not time consuming. The time consuming is the data collection, but actually doing the map is a relatively straightforward process.
Thank you, Marko. There are some comments for both you and Brian about very interesting presentation, but one question from Stuart Flower. Why did you decide 300-meter section, and how did you determine the weightings of severity from damage only to fatality? Yeah,
that's a really good question. And of course, the 300 meters was something I would say historical. So when we were doing the black spot analysis in Croatia 20 years ago, 30 years ago, in some manuals, the 300 meter was something that was defined as a location. So from this is basically the number we got from the road authorities. They are now using the moving window methodology, but they're also doing it on a 300 meter stretch. So that's why we chose 300 meter. And based on the weighting, I don't have the actual numbers now, but we basically used very similar rates as described in the international literature. So usually if you have one fatal accident, this means that on the same location you would have somewhere between 8 and 10 or 12 serious injuries, and times 10 the slight injuries. So that's something that we used as an average. Of course, we didn't have the actual studies, but we used the, let's say, average international experience.
Great. Thank you very much, Marko, for your excellent presentation and for answering the questions. There is yet another question that brings us to the end, and that's if the presentation will be shared via email. Yes, we will share the material presented here by emails to all participants, but also video recordings will be on EuroRAP webpage from next week. If there are no questions at the moment, as I don't see ones, I would like to say that I hope that these two presentations have really inspired you, and to repeat that if you want to start risk mapping in your country, please get back to us and we are happy to support and help you with that. Our next online seminar on 7th December is a research and innovation hot topic event on iRAP, and this will be led by Monica Olischlagers, who is iRAP's Global Innovation Manager and City Specialist. We would kindly like to invite you and to listen and hear more about the development in the sphere of iRAP and how this can help improving road safety in the future globally, but also in Europe. Thank you very much for participation in this seminar. We are looking forward to your comments and any questions that you may have and you didn't have time to post them now. And see you on 7th of December. Thank you very much and goodbye.